All right, welcome to the next episode of the podcast, the EchoCast. We're with Knable here again, bodybuilder extraordinaire. This guy, video does not do him justice. We'll probably show you guys how big he actually is at some point. But this guy's a big dude. But he also has a lot of knowledge to share, and that's the important thing. There are a lot of people out there who they've accomplished some decent stuff themselves, but you're not really sure if they can accomplish that with other people. Knable has plenty of proof of concept. I've seen a lot of his clients. I've seen how they respond to him, how he responds to them, and it's been a really cool thing to see him grow, both as an athlete himself and as a coach. So we're going to get into some of that stuff today, but we did leave you guys off on kind of a cliffhanger the last time, so I want to address that point first. And that was just simply talking about his personal journey when it comes to being an enhanced bodybuilder. So the last thing that we talked about was a little bit as far as his personal cycle goes, or at least his first cycle. But I wanted to have a little bit more conversation on what the progression of his cycles has looked like over the course of time. So just start wherever you feel is a good place to start, and kind of run people through your process, your thought process through it, as far as you and your coach, why you decided to go a certain route, and take us a little bit through your journey when it comes to enhancement.
So we talked about in the last episode, my first cycle was the 500 test. So I guess that was my starting point, right? So I went from probably like high 220s, almost 230, to about like 255 in that cycle. A lot of it, obviously, water. But from there, I came down on a little bit of a cruise, did another growing cycle. At that point, I can't remember exactly what it was. It was probably along the likes of like 500 tests again, maybe like 300 deca. There was some other compound in there.
What kind of time frame was there between that?
So I started, my first cycle was probably February till about June.
And that was the COVID?
That was the COVID one. And then I cruised probably till about October. And then that's leading up to late 2020 into 2021, which would then from there, I think there was probably a little bit of a cruise phase in between there. And then that was like my first prep enhanced was in 2021. So for there was, I would say I definitely used, that was the most I ever used for that prep. So we went through that. I'm not going to get into specifics of everything there. And then from there, we're in 2021. I don't know if you want me to keep like going through all of them or.
So I'll ask you a few questions throughout. So out of curiosity for myself and for the viewers, during that time, during your prep cycle, I'm assuming you probably continued to accrue some mass during that time. And that's one of the major differences that you do see between people who are using enhancements versus naturals. Very infrequently do naturals put on much size during a prep. If you had to estimate how much actual lean mass do you think you might have been putting on during that prep?
During the actual prep?
Yeah.
Just because I was newer to compounds, I think when I finally added in, a good amount of stuff, I think I definitely, did put on some muscle tissue. I wouldn't say anything crazy, maybe like 3 or 4 pounds during that, which in a prep, that's,
I mean, for a natural, you'd be ecstatic for something like that.
So obviously, you're in a pretty heavy deficit going through a prep and all that. So I wouldn't say it was anything crazy. And I really think the only reason that did happen is just because I was new to substance.
Yeah.
I don't think that that's a normal thing for most enhanced people.
And that's one of the things that people miss out on is, so it's similar to when you're if you're yeah, exactly. It's newbie gains on a cycle. Yeah. Like, and that's where I think a lot of people get mixed up. They think, oh, somebody's 240 pounds shredded the last time they were on stage. They go to prep, and because they're on gear, they can gain an additional 15 pounds of mass during a prep, and you're like, okay.
But the one thing I
do want
to say is in this time period between 2023 or 2022 to like the end of 2023 now. So like summer 22 to now, I have put on more mass on the least amount of substances than ever before in any period of my life. And I think that
Now, what would you chalk that up to?
one being, a robot with my diet and training. Like I was extremely on point with diet. I made a lot of tweaks to training that a lot of this I can accredit to my new coach that I have now. Just training the right way with, more intensity, exercise selection, how I was executing certain movements. I think that played a big role, but I really think the biggest thing was just not missing on the diet. Like, I think that was bigger than any cycle or anything I could put in my body.
That's awesome. And it's funny to hear you say that, because I actually went through a similar process within this last year where I wouldn't say I gained as much as I did in my like absolute first year of lifting. Like obviously
maybe not as much like
exactly, but there was a period of time where my gains just weren't quite as quick. And then this last bulk, when I decided, you know what, I am 100% into this. Like diet is going to be on point. I'm going to hit my macros. I'm going to hit my nutrient needs every single day. I'm going to hit my workouts with the intensity that I need every single day. And over this last year, I've put on more size than I have for probably the past 3 years, individual years, obviously. And people are like, well, why did that happen? I'm like, when you just decide that everything is going to be on point every single day, you have no clue the difference that it actually makes. And you said you did that on less compounds.
Yeah.
And that's, I think a lot of people miss out on that especially the diet aspect. Because I think there's kind of this weird shift that's happened where people used to be hyper specific about what they ate. Like in the 70s, 80s, 90s, it was like, okay, you need to be eating these types of foods, like if you want to grow the best. And they kind of understood it.
Yeah.
Even, I shouldn't say they didn't understand the mechanism necessarily, but they understood that you just did better when you did that.
Yeah.
And then the 2000s rolled in, and then the if it fits your macros crowd rolled in. And it was like, oh, well, as long as you get your macros, it doesn't really matter. Like just protein, carbs, fats, you're good to go. And then it became, oh, as long as you get your calories and your protein, then you're good. And I think it led to just a host of bodybuilders just not realizing their potential.
Yeah.
Because that was all they cared about. It was like, oh, my protein's high enough, and they're just eating Quest bars and chips to get what they need, what they think they need every single day. They are not. And I actually just experienced this. So there's a client that I literally just took on within the last few weeks, and he's phenomenal. Like I competed against him at my show.
I think it's the
tall black guy.
Yeah.
Oh, and the crazy part is he's not even that tall, but he looks super tall because his structure is so good.
Yeah.
And he's never eaten properly, never done anything like this. So I just started getting him on like a cleaner diet, like making sure that things were good. I hadn't even changed any of his training yet. And he's fuller, he's more vascular, he's like, he's getting leaner, and it's like he was trying to figure out if things were wrong because his weight wasn't dropping much, but he was getting leaner and like filling out and stuff like that. And just like, I'm like, no, like this is what happens when you eat quality. Like when you eat quality, it makes such a difference in everything performance-wise. And I think far too many people are missing out on that aspect.
100%. I have a question about that too. So obviously we both know nutrition is going to be the most important aspect out of everything. So why do you think that it's not as hot a topic on social media, especially on platforms like TikTok, when it is the most important? Everyone's talking about kind of training and biasing this and that.
I think what happens is everything kind of comes in waves. So right now the wave is optimal. But for some reason it's only lifting. Yeah. It's not, I shouldn't say for some reason. I think because it's more interesting to people. So like you talk through nutrition, it's very,
do this and
it's very repetitive. Yeah. Like if I'm trying to be on point with my diet, I eat the same thing. every single day. It's like, it's not
bodybuilding. No, like I'm trying to, like, at least with my platform, like, just get it across to people that bodybuilding in itself is extremely boring.
Yeah.
It's Groundhog Day every day. You're doing the same thing every day. And people try to make it interesting when it's just not. Like,
yeah. No, it's 100% true. Like, I find the interesting things to me are the differences in people.
yeah.
And the differences in like what structures look like, and like and like how people's anatomies come together. Like, those are the interesting things to me. But the thing is, like, people are always asking me for a workout for a particular thing. I'm like, I have shown you the same workout like 10 times and you're still watching it every single time. And the only reason it ever really changes, I shouldn't say the only reason, but the main reason that it changes is because I'm in a different gym.
Yeah.
And like that's, but other than that, my movements stay very similar. Like, there's a lot of it transfers over. Like, sure, I might do a lat pull down one day versus a weighted pull up another day, but the outcome is essentially the same.
Yeah.
Like, we're training the same body part, we're training it through the same plane of motion. Like, there's not a whole lot different about that. And I've tried to steer away from the this is the best exercise for such and such. This is the best exercise for such and such. But it's just the way that people end up growing on the platform is to make things more interesting than they actually are.
100%. And like, even so, I made a video about this not too long ago where it's like, if you look at the top guys like that ever competed, like across all generations, like you have Ronnie Coleman, you have Dorian Yates, you have Branch Warren, then you have guys, he's more classic, but like Terrence Ruffin, John Jewett, and their training, they all have things that are very consistent, right?
Mm-hmm.
Genetics, PED uses, obviously there's variances in that.
Sure.
They all nail their diet and they all train very hard. But where's the difference? It's how their training style in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, John Jewett, you know, very optimal per se. Branch Warren, not very optimally trains, you know, heavy compound movements, bad form. But when they have those 4 consistencies, right, and there's that one variance, so what's that telling me? That matters the least, and these 4 things matter the most. So this is what you should be worrying about. And this last piece that everyone's focusing on is that last, like, 2 or 3% difference.
Well, that's why for the last year, the majority of my platform, I shouldn't say the majority, but the thing that I've tried to harp on the most to people is the intensity aspect.
Yeah.
Because one, I'm not taking PEDs myself. So it's like, why would I like be talking about that constantly? It's like, we all know PEDs help. And it's one of the other things is sleep. There's only so much you can say. It's like, I've told you guys, sleep is more important than either the nutrition or the training. Like, if you're having poor sleep every single night, you're just not going to grow very well. And again, there's only so much you can say about that. So like, I could just keep saying it over and over again, but people get bored by that. And then there's the aspect where it's like, at the end of the day, you guys are going to hyperfixate on these things. So if you're going to hyperfixate on it, yeah, I'll talk about it. But at the same time, yeah, exactly. Like, I'm gonna talk about it because you guys want me to, but I want you to understand that, like you said, this is a very small piece of the pie. Like, if you don't have any of the other things in place, or even a few of the other things in place, the fact that you've got your arm moving at a particular angle is not going to be the difference maker in your physique.
Yeah.
And that's what people want to focus on. But yeah, let's get into some of your coaching aspects. So what would you say, and I'm going to let you brag on yourself a little bit. But if you were to take a look at the majority of the coaching sphere right now, there is a lot of really, really poor coaching being done, especially from influencers who competed once and decided, hey, I'm going to be a coach. What would you say are some of the major differentiators between a good coach, obviously yourself being included in that, versus people who don't really have a business, don't really have business being in coaching?
I would say the number one thing where this is just half the battle is just being attentive to your clients. Like, you see so many people just like not answer people for like 5 days or go like a whole week without answering them. Like, caring about your client's journey is, you know, half the puzzle alone. Like, if you don't care, you could be the best coach in the world, but if you're not giving them service, what are they paying for?
Right.
So I think that's where half, you know, the bad coaches are, regardless of their knowledge, is they're just not attentive to clients. Second is kind of like the Dunning-Kruger effect, where they think they know more than they actually do. So applying things that have worked for them and might not work for other people, and then, you know, expecting the results they got. I would say those are the two biggest things. And then there's just people that obviously have no idea what they're doing and not even how to structure a, you know, workout plan, or they send cookie cutter plans where everyone gets the exact same diet. So there's a lot you can get into with that.
There's so much. But yeah, the Dunning-Kruger is definitely one. And one of my biggest pet peeves is when people will answer questions that they themselves are not sure on. So when a client asks me something, I'm very honest with them. If I don't know the answer to it, I will either tell them at that point, you know what, like, I'm not really sure. Maybe I should refer you to somebody else for this particular topic, or I will go research and figure out a good answer before coming. Because I could very easily say, oh yeah, just do this. And maybe 50-50, it could be right, could be wrong. But that's not doing your due diligence. That's not going to help them. If you happen to be wrong, then they're going to go through the rest of their time with that being their knowledge. And they're going to trust it 100% because you said it. And that's where I think there's been times before where people have come into my comment sections and say, but you said this. And I'm like, and I will go digging through my own content to try and figure out where I said this, because if I did, then I want it to be clear that that's not what I meant.
Yeah.
That's not what I believe. And I think a lot of times what happens is people will say things offhand, and they have such a big platform. They say it offhand. They don't really think about how it could affect things down the line. And they've got hundreds, maybe even thousands of people following advice from one single sentence that they said back in 2021. And it's like, I think people who aren't willing to rectify those things just end up becoming, they don't even realize it, but they become the purveyors of misinformation that we see so often.
100%. And I think an important thing to realize too, even with both of us, is, well, you know, obviously, no, not to toot our horns, we're much better than a lot of people in the space. We're both technically still newer to this, right? Like, so for me, one thing that's been really big is having a mentor that I could just bounce any question off at any time. So if it's like, you know, a complicated digestive issue like colitis or something like that, that might be, you know, a little bit out of my scope. I could go, hey, like, what do you think about this issue?
Right.
So I think that's been a big thing that's helped me. And then just as, you know, I get more experience, you know, coaching people for 10, 15 years, I think that's when everything will really start to come together for sure. It's just experiences and application is the best way to learn.
I think people tend to underestimate experience in favor, because we're very much in a literature phase, which I love, because like I love literature, but people don't realize there's people I talk to in the background who are basing almost everything they do off of experience, and I'll still ask, like, I don't just throw them out. I say, okay, well, why do you believe this? Who have you seen this in? Like, what's been your, and I will talk through this before I come to full conclusions on things. So as much as we like to go off of literature and stuff, experience does play just such a vital role.
I have an interesting question about that. When do you think that applied experience would triumph literature? Because if you think about it, everything's science, right?
Right.
And the whole world is one big experiment. So if you're seeing this outcome that kind of comes, you know, frequently, but the literature might say otherwise, at what point would you say, hey, maybe this applied application triumphs the literature?
Unfortunately, we don't have as much time as I would like to answer that. but we're gonna have to leave that for another time because this is a topic that I could talk about for like 5-10 minutes, but there definitely is a place for it. Thanks guys for tuning in. That's all we got for today, but I think we're gonna make an entire special for that next topic, so stay tuned.